to look at in Psalm chapter 6. And then at the end of this video, there is going to be on the screen a guide for you to pray through that list on your own at home. I want to encourage you to not just pray this list on your own by yourself, but maybe gather your family together and go through this guided prayer list. Maybe gather a small group of adults with you to go through this guided prayer list. But we really want to start focusing on prayer on our Wednesday night midweek services. And so here we go. Here's our devotion. So if you've got your Bibles, I am reading from Psalm chapter 6, which says this: Lord, do not rebuke me in your anger. Do not discipline me in your wrath. Be gracious to me, Lord, for I am weak. Heal me, Lord, for my bones are shaking. My whole being is shaken with terror. And you, Lord, how long? Turn, Lord, rescue me, save me, because your faithful love. For there is no remembrance of you in death, and who can thank you in Sheol? I am weary from my groaning with my tears. I dampen my bed and drench my couch every night. My eyes are swollen from grief. They grow old because of all of my enemies. Depart from me, all evildoers, for the Lord has heard the sound of my weeping. The Lord has heard my plea for help. The Lord accepts my prayer. All my enemies will be ashamed and shake with terror. They will turn back and suddenly be disgraced. There are three different things that we see here in this chapter that the psalmist prays to God. In verses 1 through 3, we see that the psalmist asks God for his mercy and grace. When we go to God in prayer, we need to remember that we're praying, first of all, to a holy God, to a God that is without sin. And we have sin in our lives. We have things in our lives that we do wrong on a daily basis. And so one of the very first things that we should consider when going to God in prayer is asking God for forgiveness, asking God to have, as the psalmist puts it, for God to give us his grace and mercy in our lives and to forgive us of those things that we've done wrong in our lives. You know, mercy is God not giving us the judgment, God not giving us the punishment that we deserve in our lives. And God's grace in our lives is God giving us the things that we don't deserve, like his forgiveness. And so when we go to God in prayer, one of the first things that we should consider in that prayer is asking God to show us his grace, to show us his mercy, to forgive us of the things that we've done wrong in our lives, and to not judge us or punish us for the things that we have done wrong in our lives. The second thing that we see here in this verse, and it's from verses 4 and 5, we see the psalmist ask God to deliver him. You know, a lot of times in our lives, we get caught up in situations where the only place that we can turn is to God himself. And I can see that the psalmist has got himself into one of those types of situations. He's surrounded by his enemies. His enemies are attacking him. He has people who are opposing him. He's got people who are maybe talking about him, saying things about him behind his back. And the psalmist can't do anything about those things, but you know who can? God can. And that's what the psalmist is asking God to do. He's saying, God, you take care of the things that only you can take care of in my life. And so he's asking God to deliver him. He's asking God to do a mighty work in his life. And that's what we need to do to God today. We need to ask God to do a work in our lives, to do things in our lives and through our lives that we cannot do ourselves. In verses 6 through 10, we see the psalmist cry out to God in his misery. We are people who go through pain and misery in our lives. It could be the pain and misery of a loved one that is sick. It could be the pain and misery of maybe someone in our life that has passed away. It could be the pain and misery of being hurt by someone else. It could be a physical pain and misery that we're dealing with in our lives because of something physically that's going on with us. Maybe mentally we're going through pain and misery in our lives because of the oppression that we have, because of maybe the worry that we have in our lives, maybe the anxiety that we have in our lives. But whatever it is in your life that's causing you pain, that's causing you misery, that's causing you trouble, the psalmist teaches us here in verses 6 through 10 that we can take those things to God and we can ask God to work on those things in our lives. It's like going back up to verse 4 and 5. There's only certain things in our lives that God himself can do. And what we're doing in verse 6 through 10 is we're asking God very directly to take care of those things in our lives that are causing us pain and misery. So my question to you tonight is, how does God need to work in your life today? Take some time out of your busy schedule tonight to go to God and go through this list of things to pray. Right after I'm done here, that list is going to show up here on the screen and it's going to be there for a few seconds. You can take a screenshot of that and then go through that guided list of prayer things today.